So our last talk for this morning is called A Practice of the Impossible, Pondering the Peculiarities of Modern Sigil Magic. Please join me in welcoming Bernd-Christian Otto.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me, Jeff. It's an honor to be here. So I'm a scholar of religion from the University of Erlangen, and I work at the same Center for Advanced Studies, which Michael Luckner has presented yesterday. And while listening to these excellent papers over the past 2 days, it occurred to me that I've been sitting in archives of the impossible for the past 15 years or so, since I've started to work on the history of magic, or Western learned magic, as I like to call it. In fact, a large number of manuscript archives full of magical texts exists. And haven't we all heard and learned in school that magic is impossible? You simply can't attract a lover, become rich or invisible through practicing some weird ritual, right? The idea, or shall we rather say the stereotype, that magic is impossible accompanied the history of magic since the last 2.5 millennia. Yet people have continued to and still perform today manifold such practices of the impossible. I would therefore like to suggest that magic is included in the vision of this conference series, and will present today one particular contemporary, very popular practice, namely sigil magic. Sigil magic is only one of a plethora of practices of the impossible that are practiced still today and that I could present here, yet it lends itself particularly well to our discussions, as we shall see. Now, before I present my talk, I would like to ask who of you has heard of sigil magic or has practiced sigil magic? Oh, that's nice. It corresponds to something which I will present. So maybe 2/3 of the population of the group here. Now, for those of you who don't know it, I will begin by illustrating an example of sigil magic. So what could I choose? It is my wish to give a great talk on sigil magic. Let's see. Okay, here you have an example of a sigil. Sigils are graphical depictions of wishes. And yes, let's pick up this sigil and put it into my talk. So we can all test at the end whether it worked or not. Good. So over the next roughly 20 minutes, I will walk you through different aspects of this practice. First, I will go a bit into the history of sigil magic, or pre-modern sigil magic. Then I will outline how this particular technique emerged in the 20th century. It's basically a modern invention, a psychologized version of magic. I will basically give you a full-on manual of sigil magic so that you can do it at home afterwards. I will then present some experience reports, because that's really where it becomes interesting, I think. And finally, I will pose the question that many of us ask all the time: what do we make of this? So first of all, some history. The term sigil goes back to the Latin word sigillum, which means seal, signet, image, or icon. This term has been used in texts of what I call Western learned magic, at least from the 12th century onwards. It is a very common and often used term in these texts. But the broader idea is that unintelligible graphs, signs, images, or letters, they are used in magical texts, at least from late antiquity onwards until this day. So this is a very big topic we could say that the unintelligible is strongly connected to the impossible in this particular set of texts. I will present a few examples. This is one of the earliest ones from one of the Greek magical papyri. It's a so-called phylacterion, a protective amulet, and the text says that it protects the body against demons, ghosts, every disease, and every suffering. It is an Ouroboros, a snail that bites its tail, and in the middle of the image you see these weird letters. They are called characteres in Greek, which is the Greek word for letter. They are often translated as ring letters, and they run through this corpus of texts. There are thousands of these letters exist in thousands of texts. No one knows where they came from. No one really knows what they mean. They always have a contextual meaning, but there is no abstract meaning. It's not an alphabet of any kind. So this is one important example that still informs present-day sigil magic. This is an example from an Islamic text. It's a seal, a khatim. It's interestingly the same word that has been used to denote Muhammad, the seal of the prophets. And this particular seal, it has 7 lines and 7 columns. It's a cell square with so-called 7 seals of Solomon. And it has a lot of impossible purposes. When you draw it on a paper and wear it on your body, it fulfills all desires, destroys one's enemies. You can travel rapidly across large distances, talk to angels and jinn, and so on. This is a third example from the 14th century, roughly, a Latin manuscript in the library of Kassel. This is a very famous seal within the history of Western magic. It has been copied many times. It was originally called Sigillum Dei, seal of God. And in the original text, the Liber Juratus, it is used for a long 72-day ritual for obtaining a premortal vision of God and his celestial place. But the text also mentions 92 other impossible purposes. This is also a very interesting seal from the 18th century, from a manuscript in the library of Leipzig. And this is used for treasure hunting, for finding and unburying hidden treasure. This is my last pre-modern example. It's from a text called Goetia. It's a demon list. Each demon comes with a unique sigil. And when you conjure and ban a sigil, you have to use this particular sigil, which is ascribed to each spirit. Now, interestingly, this text, it's early modern or even late medieval, but it has been edited in 1904 by no other than Aleister Crowley. So you see that this type of sigil magic, or we could say the use of sigils which are predefined, you simply find them in a text, you have to copy them and use them exactly in the way that is prescribed. It was still very much en vogue in the early 20th century. So we could summarize, there are a few pre-modern functions of sigils. First, they are the name of gods or intermediary beings. They are a tool for summoning and controlling these entities. They are tools for self-protection during these ritual procedures. They are tools for revealing special or higher knowledge, and sometimes they are simply repositories of divine power, which you can, for instance, hold against a storm to ward it off. So they have power. Maybe because they are unintelligible. Now, sigil magic really took off in the early 20th century with this book. It's written by Austin Osman Spare, a fairly unknown British artist and ritual magician. He was in contact with Aleister Crowley. They were kind of friends between 1907 and 1912, 13. So Spare was well aware of this pre-modern sigil thing, you know, these weird signs, but he completely transformed this technique into something new and psychologized because he had read Sigmund Freud. I quote from this text so that you get a feel for his prose. All desire, whether for pleasure, knowledge, or power that cannot find natural expression, can by sigils and their formula find fulfillment from the subconsciousness. Sigils are the means of guiding and uniting the partially free belief with an organic desire, its carriage and retention till its purpose served in the subconscious self and its means of reincarnation in the ego. Sigils are monograms of thought for the government of energy. So what he basically does is he connects the idea of the sigil to the subconsciousness and to a desire, and thereby builds something new. He basically invents a new technique, which you can see here. This is a photograph from the book. So you take a word, take the letters, and you rearrange them above one another so that, a weird sign or an unintelligible sign appears, which basically carries the information of the word. And you can do this also with a combination of words and full sentences, full will sentences, as he calls them. And for instance, he uses the example, "This is my wish to obtain the strength of a tiger." And you can see the example below. So Speer was quite unknown. He was an unsuccessful artist for the rest of his life. He had some popularity in the beginning, but then his life is it's not a successful story, if we might say. But then he was recognized by some later magicians. First of all, Kenneth Grant, who was also a student of Aleister Crowley, and he ran an OTO lodge for a while, and then he basically became one of the most well-known ritual magicians of the second half of the century, the 20th century. He died in 2011, and he popularized Austin Osman Spare in the early 70s, and then chaos magic came. Authors like Peter Carroll, Phil Hine, Ralph Tegma, and others, they picked up sigil magic, and thereby sigil magic really became one of the core techniques of modern chaos magic. Yes, and then the internet came, and I think it's fair to say that sigil magic is today one of the most, and maybe the most popular magical practice in the West. You can find more than 41,000 hits in Google Books. There is hundreds of how to do YouTube videos. The most successful one having 725,000 views. It's all over the place on TikTok, or WitchTok as it is today often called. There are also many other online tools like the one I've showed in the beginning. This one is graphically a bit more interesting, I think. And of course there are now also handy apps. So it's really all over the place. It's very popular. And why is it so popular? I think it's a collection of various aspects. Sigil magic is very simple. Everyone can do it without any training. It's fast. You don't need 72 days or so to achieve a goal. You can do it in a few minutes. It's secular, no spirits. You don't even have to believe in it. Just try it out. It reflects the modern, commercialist, consumerist state of our culture. It's instantaneous wish fulfillment, if you like. It's cool. It reflects modern aesthetics. And according to many practitioners, it's very efficacious, and you find this all over the place, experience reports all over the internet, that this is really a very efficacious practice. And I think it's interesting. We have to take this serious. It also entered pop culture, or occulture, as it's called since Christopher Partridge. You all know this guy, Grant Morrison. You're all avid readers of Jeffrey Kripal's books. So he claimed that his comic series Invisibles was basically a hypersigil. Hypersigil develops the sigil concept beyond the static image and incorporates elements such as characterization, drama, and plot. And he claims that this comic book series was a 6-year-long sigil in the form of an occult adventure story, which consumed and recreated my life during the period of its composition and execution. The hypersigil is an immensely powerful and sometimes dangerous method for actually altering reality in accordance with intent. Results can be remarkable and shocking. Now comes the manual. How does it work? So for me, this is a practice of the impossible, and there are various different techniques. I follow the so-called world method described by Ralf Tickmeyer in his 2011 introduction to Western ritual magic. So sigil magic works through 4 steps. You formulate the will sentence, as I've done in the beginning. You fabricate the sigil. You charge the sigil, and then you forget the sigil. These 2 elements are very important. You already understood how the first 2 things work. I have chosen the will sentence, "It is my wish that I will give a great presentation on sigil magic." According to this method, you delete all duplicate letters in the sentence so that a bunch of letters remain. And these remaining letters, you squeeze and arrange them above one another so that something like this comes out of it. And then you can use your creativity and turn it into a more nice and neat graphic depiction of your wish. Then, and this is key, you have to load the sigil into the subconsciousness through inducing an altered state of mind of any type. So you have to get out of your everyday consciousness, otherwise it doesn't work. You have to achieve some state of trance or ecstasis. Many modern practitioners combine this with sexual magic because the sexual orgasm is basically the easiest way for any normal person to achieve an altered state of mind for a while, a few seconds or so. A practice recommended by Ralf Tickmeyer is the death pose, where we basically close all our senses, keep the breath, and just shortly before we would die, we suck in the air and stare at the sigil. And that's allegedly a moment where you can actually upload the sigil into the subconsciousness. And then, also important, we have to forget the sigil right away and the wish. We have to ban it from the consciousness. You load it into the subconsciousness and you ban it from the consciousness. And one of the practices recommended is hysterical laughter, because try it out. When you laugh, you erase anything in your mind. You cannot think something intellectually demanding while hysterically laughing. So it empties the mind, and then you should ongoingly distract yourself from the wish and from the sigil. You should not put it in your drawer and look at it every day and count the minutes until it happens. You should forget it, and the best thing is, if you want to control the success of your practice, be surprised when it actually happens. There are some further rules. I mean, I want to equip you with all the important aspects to it. Never use negative will formulations. I don't want to be sick next week. Doesn't work. You will be sick next week because the subconsciousness does not understand the word no. Don't use complicated jargon or loan words. Don't use too precise formulations. So in two weeks, 1 day, and 17 hours from now, I will have 1 million euros on my bank account. Is too precise. Subconsciousness cannot deal with this rigid type of thinking. But you should also not be too vague. So it should be something that can actually be manifested. And therefore, you should choose realistic goals. They should actually be possible to manifest also without doing the practice. But you can basically bend the chances in your favor so that it's more likely to happen. So no grandiloquent goals. And you should really aim for the edge of ecstasis or trance. So really give your best to get out of your everyday consciousness. Be patient. I already said that. Don't check every day whether it worked. And this is also very important, disidentify from the outcome. Don't care what you've wished for. Don't care if it works or not. But also don't rationalize and doubt. So just do it and then let it go and happen. So what's the theory behind this? Obviously, the basic idea is that the subconsciousness bears a magical power, we could call it that, to materialize wishes or desires. It's the subconsciousness that does the job. No spirits here. So we could say it's a form of brain hacking, we smuggle disguised wishes, which are the sigils, into the subconsciousness, because the subconsciousness is deaf to words but receptive to images. That's how the subconsciousness works. And the altered states of mind, why are they important? You have to achieve this state because the consciousness is characterized, or it has as an element in itself the so-called inner censor. And the censor always sabotages the magician through our socialization, what we've learned in school, rationalizations, our thinking, our doubts and fears. And the altered states of mind, they are important because we can, in this moment, circumvent the censor and actually implant the sigil and the wish in the subconsciousness. So I think the very interesting thing about this practice is it's a reversal of psychic repression. So Speer read Freud, and he learned that subconscious desires and wishes, they are very powerful in creating our everyday reality. And he basically turned this upside down. He turned an unconscious process into a conscious process, a controlled repression, we might say, so that the wish and the sigil becomes an organic part of the subconsciousness, assuming that subconscious wishes and desires, they are more powerful than conscious wishes and desires. Sigils will flesh, Speer wrote. And I think what's really interesting about this from a history of magic perspective is that a process deemed partially problematic and pathological, at least in classical psychoanalysis, becomes an instrument of magical wish fulfillment and destiny control. It again shows the creativity of magicians. So they always observe what's going on and they take the best out of it and try to use it for their purposes. Now let's have a look at 3 short experience reports. I think this is where it becomes really interesting. The first one is taken from a book from 2003. One evening, after I had attended Talking Stick with Jason and Damien, the 2 of them decided to go to a nightclub and invited me along. After an hour spent approaching likely drug dealers in the club, they returned empty-handed. Jason decided that some magic was required to nudge the probabilities in their favor. Jason and Damien settled on the following statement of intent: we wish to buy drugs. A sigil was quickly constructed from this and drawn on a cigarette paper. They shared the cigarette in silence while presumably concentrating on the sigil. So what happens then? 50 minutes later, they had the drugs. Suddenly, a dealer emerged out of the blue, and they bought it. They took the drugs. An hour or so after taking the speed, they realized that it was having little or no noticeable effect. Damien humorously suggested that although the sigil had worked, the initial statement of intent had been too vague. It should have read, we wish to buy good drugs. Second example is from a master thesis actually published last year in academia. I have struggled with my body image and weight gain since reaching middle age and have spent a lot of time and effort attempting to lose weight with little success. Therefore, I decided that my intent was to lose weight. I settled on I will weigh 85 kilograms. Did it work? I'm writing this approximately 3 months after the ritual process was completed. So this is an autoethnography, partly. It's quite interesting. And I have dropped in weight from 95 to 86.3 kilograms. I've also stuck to the changes in diet and continued to regularly follow the exercise program I created. Moreover, I have gained in confidence and am happy in myself and with my body image. This would suggest that the sigil was imprinted onto my subconscious and that it has had the desired effect. While I have not hit the exact weight specified in the sigil, I'm continuing to lose weight and view this as an ongoing project. Third and last example. He, Frater A, fabricated a sigil with the word method for the will sentence, I wish to possess 1,000 Deutschmarks, is from the 1990s, I think, until the week after next. Now, the important thing here is that the German word is used besitzen, possess, and loaded it through sexual magic. After circa 1.5 weeks, Frater A visited a friend and took a seat on his sofa in the living room. The friend began to search for his purse and became increasingly nervous. Finally, both realized that Frater A had inadvertently seated himself on the purse. To his greatest surprise, the purse contained almost exactly the sum for which he had loaded the sigil. What has happened? Apparently, his subconsciousness took the expression possess, besitzen, a little too literal, and transformed it into a post-sit, to sit on. We should be aware that the subconsciousness likes to walk the line of least resistance when it attempts to fulfill a magical assignment. So what do we make of this? First of all, through Speer's idea, sigil magic turned into an individualized, creative, and ever-adaptive magical consciousness techniques. This is, I think, interesting compared to the slavish mimicry of predefined icons beforehand. So it's really a change, an innovation in the history of magic, and that's also how I write the history of magic. It's a history of ongoing change. There is no static thing that runs through its history from antiquity to today, but it's highly creative, ever adaptive, and innovative. It's also a prime example of what has been discussed as the psychologization of magic in the 20th century. So there's a big debate about this. Magic has become psychologized in modern times. So we could say, from a practitioner perspective, it is obviously the mind that works the magic here. I'm quoting Tanja Luhrmann's famous monograph, Persuasions of the Witchcraft. But pondering these three case studies or experience reports, we can ask ourselves, does this magic work only within the mind? So the first example, something happens and you ascribe it in retrospect to the event, which may have happened anyway. No one has ever done systematic evidence-based research on these techniques. So people do it and they ascribe later events to the practice. So this is not, amazing, we might say. It's not extremely impressive. The second example also, we could say it works through psychosomatic influence or an auto-influence. But the third example, I think, is more interesting because something weird is going on there, which was quite unlikely to happen. So does this practice work also beyond the mind and the body? That's what we can ask ourselves. And this, of course, relates to something that has been mentioned various times during this conference. It's the mind-matter dualism, the mind-matter problem. And I'm not discussing this much now, so let's assume as a working hypothesis that matter is in the mind. So we take up an idealist perspective. Consciousness is key, and reality is produced within consciousness. And then we can actually assume that when we influence or when we do something within our consciousness, we can actually affect outer realities. This is a model of reality proposed by Dean Radin in his 2018 book, Real Magic. So only from the perspective of our everyday consciousness, we perceive a seemingly separate and disparate outer material reality. But when we dive deep in our consciousness, tap onto the subconscious processes, and especially deep states of trance and gnosis, then we can tap onto basic quantum or subquantum mechanical effects. And this is exactly what we will do in the future. So I'm also a trustee of a charity called Research Network for the Study of Esoteric Practices. We fund research and we want to push the boundaries of accepted knowledge. We want to push the boundaries into the impossible. And we will collaborate with Dean Radin, who I just mentioned, from the Institute of Noetic Sciences. He was also mentioned, I think, on the first day in one of the slides. And we will actually co-fund the first experimental study of a technique of Western ritual magic that has ever been conducted. And we'll test the potential influence of sigil magic on a basic quantum mechanical phenomenon, namely the so-called collapse of the wave function. So I don't know if you remember this from your physics classes in school, or whether you're still a professional physician. But basically, the problem of the collapse of the wave function is that when you shoot atomic particles, for instance electrons, onto a double-slit system, then they usually create a wave function. So there's the wave function of these particles. But when you actually measure the particles before they go through the two slits, they suddenly turn into particle-like things. So this is the so-called collapse of the wave function. Observing the process creates a change in the behavior of these particles. It's the observer, the quantum mechanical observer problem. And we will use this problem and create a small thing, a device. It's an Internet of Things optoelectronics device. It will be quite small. And we will equip this with a double-slit optical system. Nowadays, these are quite cheap. So one of these devices will cost roughly $50. And then we will send these devices to 50 people who will do the thing. And we ask them to direct their awareness towards or away from the double-slit system inside the apparatus. So they basically concentrate on the thing, and they will do it with or without sigil magic. And the idea is to see if consciousness, meaning awareness in the form of the mind's eye, could be considered as a sort of measurement, and therefore influence this quantum mechanical phenomenon. So you can see this as a form of a tratak meditation, but it will not be directed towards a candle, but towards this device. And we have basically, we'll test the hypothesis whether mental intention enhanced through the use of a sigil will alter the sensor's behavior as compared to periods when attention is withdrawn or focused elsewhere. And we will also ask, let's call them lay magicians, so unexperienced practitioners, and we will also have a bunch of very experienced practitioners and test whether the effect of these people will be stronger on the measurement device. So the beauty of this idea is that if we can take a magical technique, sigil magic, to produce convincing evidence for a mental effect on the quantum measurement problem, then we will have advanced our understanding of the most discussed and refined theory of the physical world that is currently out there through actually using a magical technique. I really find this quite nice. So regular updates on this project will be published on RENSEP.org. That's the website of the charity which I just mentioned. It's not yet online. We will launch it probably in June. And you can find updates on this project on this website. So now I release you from the spell of my sigil. And thank you for your attention.